What if we gathered 16 of the world's best flesh and blood players and put them head to head?
Belittle, creating a rune chant, attacking with overload, and that's game!
Matthew Foulkes is your second Pro Tour champion.
16 of the world's toughest flesh and blood players duke it out for a $2,000 prize pool.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once more to the Goliath Gauntlet, a flesh and blood invitational. We are in our second weekend of games now, and we still have the last couple of matches of our round of 16 to play out. Now, somehow, in terms of our scheduling, we managed to put some doozies together for you. I just want to prepare everybody. Do I go to see one hero today and one hero alone? Why don't you let us know, Tannon Grace, who that is going to be?
Now, Uber, I'm glad that we're both wearing jackets today because it's going to be a cold day on the cover today. We've got two Icelander mirrors set up for us today. Now, there's a one, at least a very intricate one, where the players are going to be playing a lot of back and forth, doing a lot of cool things. But who are our heroes that we have playing in the actual side of the players today in these mirror matches?
Yeah, let's have a look at the bracket and see where we're at right now. We have two more matches that we need to resolve. The first of those is Brendan Patrick versus MajiinBae, otherwise known as Caleb Van Patten, a well-known Legends of Runeterra streamer and someone who's put up some excellent results in Flesh and Blood already. And after that, we'll be having Michael Feng going up against Matthew Foulkes. There was plenty of trash talk from the Foulkes end in this particular head-to-head. And those that know, Matthew, not that he actually managed to take down PT2 on a Briar list, but having since switched to... Okay, I'll be honest, he just literally copied Michael Hamilton's deck. He didn't even bother... He literally sent me Michael Hamilton's FAB DB entry. It wasn't even a deck that he made. He just slapped it in there. So we're going to see those two go to head-to-head, but let's talk a little bit about our first matchup. First of all, Brendan Patrick, of course, a player who's been around in Flesh and Blood for quite some time. He's second place in calling Austin in 2019, and then in Blitz Unlimited has also put up pretty decent results at a calling in Dallas. I think it was in 2021. He top-8'd that, and then there was a battle hardened in Dallas in 2021 for Blitz. So really prolific community figure, one half of Arsenal Pass and a huge part of the Arsenal Pass Fitness Challenge, which for me has been fantastic to follow along earlier this year. An initiative where a lot of the members of their community all got together and set goals for themselves in terms of their physical fitness and achieved them and then motivated each other as well. So I've got to give that a shout out. Brendan is super swole as well, good looking guy, and obviously a great role model, I think, in the world of Flesh and Blood, even if he wants to count people's decks card for card after they shuffle up. But that's a side note. That's just something he likes to do. Let's have a look at his list though, Tannon, because his is probably the most interesting Icelander list, and not just on virtue of the fact that he hasn't just copy pasted his. I spy with my little eye a pair of Ether Wildfires in the list.
Yeah, that one kind of stood out to me. It was a little different than, I think he might be one of the only Icelander, if not the only Icelander in our tournament, which is the most represented hero that we have, that is playing the card Aether Wildfire. I was wondering, Uber, do you have a reason that you think he's playing Aether Wildfire? Is he looking to maybe be a little more combo-centric than some of the Icelanders we've seen? Because we see less of the physical attacks in his deck than we do in the other ones.
Yeah, there are some. There's also like an Eisenhower Weathervane in this list as well. So there's a good chance that, Brendan is hoping to blow people up pretty big. Obviously, that Ether Wildfire is really important on a turn where you're Storm Stridering it into play, and very likely as a finisher. In the kind of matchup, though, where Icelanders run AP5 typically against each other. So I don't know if that will be particularly relevant in this matchup, but it's an interesting add in here that Eisenhower Weathervane was something that people toyed with in the early stages of deck building for Iceland, and many people went away from. This list also includes a 3 of Oasis Respite, which isn't a given in Icelander decks, especially because they can tech for the mirror pretty comfortably in terms of that extra AB. So a lot of interesting stuff, hard to find all there as well if the game does go long. And a couple of these attacks, but you're dead right. We're not seeing any Wounded Bulls in this particular list. Enlightened Strike's in there, Command and Conqueror's in there. The latter, which is also not that relevant in a mirror where Icelander can just, whip that Arsenal card out at instant speed and make something happen with it. Let's have a look at the other side, though. Let's talk a little bit about MajiinBae, a personal friend of ours as well, member of our Discord community playtest group. Taught me single-handedly how to play OTK Viserai, which not only with a hard arch type, but also a rather dense player is quite an achievement on his part, I might suggest. And yeah, put up great results. So 3 Pro Quest wins to MajiinBae's name. He's also a day 2'd the Pro Tour and represented at US Nats. Let's have a look at MajiinBae's list here, because this one to me is, again, a little bit closer to what we saw from Hamilton. In fact, it's extremely close. So we'll note the brothers in arms, 3 of in here is interesting, especially if there is any chance of you facing like a heavy physical matchup. But it's got the wounded balls, it's got the fighting spirits as well, Tannon.
Yeah, those are the calling card, right, of the Michael Hamilton Icelander. When you first look at it, you're like, how close is this to Hamilton's list? Is there Wounded Bull? Is there Fighting Spirit? Is there Scar for Scar? That's going to be interesting in the mirror match when you have Scar for Scar in your deck, since you both start at 36, so you don't get the automatic go again for free that you do in some of the matchups. But I actually talked to Majin a little bit before this, and he was saying, yeah, he pretty much copy, cut, and pasted Hamilton's list and then changed a few things here or there. So you'll see the deck is like a few cards different from him, but sure. Majin, huge Wizard fan. He said since he's been playing, he loved Kano. So Icelander being, what a lot of people think the best hero in the game right now, he's super happy, and he's very happy that he got to bring this deck to this tournament, and that it's actually very good.
Yeah. I would also say Brendan is a prolific Wizard lover. Big Kano player. If you, in the early days of Talishar, if you ran into a Kano player, it was probably Brendan just working on his lines and just blowing people out in a lot of those games. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, our 7th of our round of 16 matches, it's going to be Brendan Patrick versus MajiinBae. And I want to point out, Tanner, very quickly, the most important card of this matchup may prove to be Alluvian Constellus, that legendary wizard chest piece that has that arcane barrier 1. And the first time it prevents arcane damage per turn, you put an energy counter on it, and you can use those counters to pay for your staff attacks. MajiinBae going first, already throwing down an affliction.
You know what? This is perfect timing, Uber, for both of these. Alluvian Constellus is probably one of the most important, if not the most powerful thing that's going on there. Every time that you get to activate it for AB, it's almost like you're getting a resource back. Your goal is to try to play around that as much as possible with your Waning Moon and arcane damage effects in the mirror. Sometimes you can't, but you're going to see these players kind of tiptoe around each other a little bit and make sure that they make their opponent's Alluvian Constellus as bad as possible, trying to make their own as good as possible. Now we see that Frost Hex for MajiinBae, and this is extremely important, and this means that MajiinBae is actually super far ahead this early in the game, because Frost Hex is really good because it gives you a ton of range in the matchup. Like, you can kill from bunches of different ways from here. Things like Ice Eternal and Frostbites, very, very importantly, can come in, and Brennan might not have a way to play through them or at the right time be able to play through them, and they're going to deal tons of extra damage.
All right, so we have an Amulet of Ice coming down here from Brendan on his turn. Obviously, that will give a discard or pay to effect. If, of course, there's an Ice Fuse that happens and he chooses to activate it. And there's an Enlightened Strike following up. And it looks like that was a Sink and Draw effect.
Missed that one too. Sorry, Uber.
That's fine. It may... We'll find out. It's not representing it with a dice at the moment here, and we'll know once the damage starts to get taken. So Amulet of Ice out of the arsenal here in MajiinBae. This is very much a part of the setup plan, and will also, of course, be a Frostbite inflicted on Brendan Patrick as a result of that. Not the most powerful thing that Icelander can do from her arsenal, but you're spending these first few turns purely on the setup. Like you pointed out, Tannon, that MajiinBae's in a good spot, right? You're playing for a longer game with those Frost Hexes, and we'll have an Ether Hail here to block.
Alan, is that like a mixture between Tannon and Talishar? Did you get the two names mixed up there?
I'm not actually sure where I was going. There's a League of Legends hero as well. Maybe that's what it is. I'm getting my wires crossed in my secondary games that I cast. Who knows?
So this is what happens when you cast too many different games, Uber.
So was that... Okay, so that looks like it came in for 5, right? Yeah. 2 damage taken by MajiinBae there. Arsenal card for Brendan, and then a Findle's Fighting Spirit off a Brothers in Arms pitch.
And that's going to actually gain Majin 1 here. So you see why you let a little bit of damage leak over there. It does make certain cards like Scar for Scar and Fighting Spirit a little bit better in his list. And this is one of the differences. The biggest difference in the list is that Majin has these... They're almost like Guardian attacks, right? 7 or 8 for 3 resources, that Brendan Patrick doesn't have access to, since his is a little more traditionally wizard based in his build. So here's the thing. If Majin doesn't have the really good setup turns, like, we've seen, an item come out of his arsenal, not something like one of the big spells that do a bunch of damage or something furious there. He still has this as backups. It's just attack you for 7 for 3 resources. And this was the big turning point in building this deck that Michael Hamilton figured out. The fact that not only is it attacking you in different ways, but it just has a better range of attacks from here. And it puts Brendan into some really rough spots here as well, because he can't do the same back to Majin.
Ice Eternal here for the block, and that's 4 damage being taken by Brendan Patrick. Again, some of those lower life effects that MajiinBae has in his deck getting turned off here, but he's not too worried. Again, it's tough to sort of stop these larger attacks with, things like Channel Link Frigid or even just Frostbites in general, as they're better geared against decks that want to go wider, lower to the ground here. Brendan opts not to play his Arsenal card on that turn, and instead it's going to be an Ether Ice Vein, fusing a Cold Snap here. And if I'm not mistaken, that's the yellow variant, so that is 4 arcane damage. Now again, if you're Icelander, you absolutely have the ability to block the entirety of this if you so choose. And we'll see if that is what the plan is for Margin. If that's a blue, then Margin's blocking it out completely here, and that may actually be the case.
Here we see another really good example of the differences in the builds and why it's important. Like you said, the Icelander decks in the mirror are very geared to stop all of the arcane damage coming through, and very easily, along with Luvian Costellos. Now it has a counter on it for MajiinBae. That's really important. When it starts getting bigger, he starts to get these resources back, and his turns become very efficient and very good. Physical attacks are significantly stronger than these red or yellow damage effects in the mirror, because Icelander has such a high blue count and lots of AB plus Luvian Costellos makes it really bad. And then he has stuff like this. He can just Wounded Bull from here. And look, it's not going to get the bonus, but this is still just a 7 for 3 that Brendan Patrick has to give multiple cards to. He can't use his AB to stop. This just puts him in a really rough spot.
Yeah, Brendan obviously, also can't interact. See, there's no priority window here for him to play a card from his arsenal, giving his opponent a Frostbite, making this Wounded Ball more expensive than it otherwise would have been. So, we're going to have 2 cards from hand to block this. It's going to be a Cold Snap and it looks like another Ether Ice Vein here. And this will lead up most of that damage. And Brendan obviously now, looks like that was an Emeritus Scolding, if I'm not mistaken, under there.
Happening really fast. Gonna keep you on your toes here, trying to keep up.
A lot of glare on that card, yeah, whichever it was.
Absolutely. Great setup from our players here today. Being able to see everything. This is great. Love seeing it. A little bit of the glare. We're still ironing out all the kinks here on the Goliath Gauntlet. We're going to try to have it 100% for every matchup here in the second round, doing the best. The players are doing amazing work at getting this as good as possible for everybody at home. This does look like a Channel Link Frigid, though, out of the arsenal for Majin here.
So wouldn't hurt MajiinBae too badly, because again, he just pitches an extra card to these large attacks. But Brendan, in general, Icelander does not like to be CLF'd herself. Quite frustrating. And it looks like that Luvian Constellus is going to give MajiinBae a free attack here. Pretty frustrating to have to deal with that. And again, because that was on Brendan's turn, if I'm not mistaken, that is that 3 damage that's going to come his way, as is reflected now in the life totals. And yeah, the Frostbite also expiring at the end of Brendan's turn will cause an extra damage to come his way because there's a Frost Hex in play.
Yep, neither one of these players has drawn an energy potion yet. Energy pot, as we like to effectively call it. But in both the list, I have to assume in both the decks here presented today, because
they both have 2.
Yeah, definitely one of the best cards in the matchup, especially if you have something like Frost Hex on you, or any of the other stuff that has to do with, like Chilling Ice Vein, anything that you want these extra resources sitting around. This gives you a lot of range to be able to stop stuff like Ice Eternal, extra discard effects, while also being able to keep you from having to discard from on-hit abilities, just being able to pay extra with your extra resources. So that, along with something like Luvian Costellos, can get you really far ahead. So look to see if one of these players were to draw one early in either of the matchups that we see today. That can put them at a significant advantage.
Frustrating from Brendan Patrick is he's been unable to derive any value from his Luvian Constellus so far, as these are all non-arcane attacks coming from MajiinBae. Again, it looks like a 2-card block, and Brendan obviously taking that hit there. So he at least, is able to respond in kind. There is a Wounded Bull here from Brendan Patrick. Even if that's not reflected in the list that he presented me.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it myself. I think you might have saw the look on my face. I was like going through the deck list. There's a chance that he updated his deck list before the tournament. We had that happen a few times. We allowed these players to update until the last moment because they didn't know what their opponents are playing against. Again, we're in round 1 where deck lists are closed. They will be open for all the players round 2 though, because we've had coverage of these people. So
Absolutely.
also, I love what you pointed out here about like the free attacks and the ability that Majin has gotten value off his Cancelos while Brendan has not. I think it's probably the most important thing in the mirror matches. If one player can derive value from Cancelos and the other one can't, I think it's just an actual huge advantage. And we're seeing that play out in this game.
It's a 9 life lead here for MajiinBae, and he'll be able to develop a energy potion on his turn.
Another really big impactful thing in the mirror match here. Majin really flexing his muscles in the mirror match here. Something him and Brennan, both the guys, they're strapping young men. They're in the gym a lot. They do a lot of lifting, and we're seeing it really pay off for Majin here in this matchup.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. The energy potion looking more like a flask of pre-workout for the guy here. That's an Emeritus Scolding once more from Brendan Patrick from Arsenal. And again, remember that is a card that does more damage if it's being done on the opponent's turn. So
it does look like all 4 of it's going to get
here.
through as well. Yeah. Are you a pre-workout guy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yep. I can't do it without it anymore. I'm addicted now.
So this is also a Waning Moon for 3. Now, this all happened, of course, just before MajiinBae was able to move to his draw step, as most of these players are going to be unleashing their biggest sort of damage spells on their opponent's turn, close to the end of it in many cases. So MajiinBae, the energy potion can also represent extra power for a nice Eternal if it's going to be fused, creating more of those frostbites. But generally, those get cycled until the later part of the game. But popping a cheeky little Ether Ice Vein, broadsiding your opponent with it never hurts. Brendan now obviously can eat this. Sure, he has AB5. It's coming in for 5. That would be 5 resources having to be pitched for it, though. Something Brendan may not prefer to do, excuse me.
Yeah, and this is kind of highlighting the turn before versus this one. You saw Brendan really choose his spots well on where to strike there. He did everything when Majin went to, hey, I'm going to arsenal a card. I have just this card left over in my hand. If you want to do something now, you have to use that card and you don't get to arsenal. Majin's having to do this during his own turn here, so this gives Brendan the ability to use his entire hand, which it does look like he's going to pitch, I think that's 2 blues there to prevent all of this damage and has a resource floating. And this is something you're going to see in the Wizard Mirror matchup a lot, is timing matters a lot on everything that you do here.
And there it is. So it's also going to be a poke with the Waning Moon, most of which appears to be eaten. Or Brendan perhaps just taking a little bit of that damage. And
yeah, he took one of the 2, I believe.
Yeah, so he used whatever he had floating. Wounded Bull.
Another wounded Bull.
Again, with
and
Brendan
he's at a lower
being
life total here.
Yep.
Yeah. Really impactful. We saw how impactful this could be at US Nationals with Michael Hamilton winning there with a card that I had to Google while I was sitting in the caster's chair. Something that doesn't always feel good. He plays a card and I had to pull my phone out, go to the FAB, one of those websites. And yeah, I was like, what does this card actually do? I don't think I've seen this since doing my Farewell to Wraith drafts. And then even then I'd only see it like 15th in the pack.
Yeah, it's a common again from Welcome to Wraith. Again, it's 8 damage off 2 cards ostensibly, which is significantly above rate when you're at lower life here, and that's really what Icelander wants to do. Be efficient. It is a high blue count in Icelander's list, so generally she can afford to go for some of these larger attacks. And yeah, in a matchup like this now, MajiinBae has to really make the decision. He has an Arsenal card, and of course, there's plenty he can do now as it's Brendan's turn. Brendan is not going to follow this up with anything else, I suspect. This is just the Wounded Bull and then move to end step. So this is the main priority window for MajiinBae as a wizard, as Icelander, to act on his opponent's turn. And he may opt to, do something before we even move to blocks here. Or he'll select cards and then maybe use what he has remaining. Blocking with 2 cards or more generally means that you can't be fusing anything. So it's just the Emeritus Scolding here. This is just poke damage for all intents and purposes. 4 coming Brendan's way. And he says, well, I'm going to have to take that because I don't really have a lot in my hand. And now MajiinBae has the opportunity to decide what he does. Okay, so the energy potion gets used for the Waning Moon. So it's just extra poke here, 3 more damage going the way of Brendan Patrick. And wow, MajiinBae taking all of that. Just trying to make sure he stays ahead in the race here.
Absolutely. And I was going to say that this is one of the important turns for Energy Pot because if Majin wanted to block from hand here, he still had the Energy Potion left over to be able to do something like play something from his arsenal plus Waning Moon with the cards left over. But you can see why he chose to just take that damage and just make sure that he got the Emeritus Scolding plus the Waning Moon activation through. This puts Brendan down to a lower life total, and then he's going to come back around in his turn with a fused Aether Ice Vein, kind of regaining a lot of that tempo that he just lost from that big swing.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot fuse an Aether Ice Vein unless you have 3 cards, assuming it's coming out of your hand, or you need 2 cards in your hand plus the Aether Ice Vein in your arsenal in order to pull this off. So you're pretty disincentivized to block heavily when you want to fuse that Aether Ice Vein in the following turn. Now, again, this is an inflection point for Brendan because while there are a lot of blues here in the Icelander lists, there are quite a few reds, and we've been seeing them thrown across the table multiple times. Wounded Bulls, Findle's Fighting Spirit, even things like this Aether Ice Vein. And depending on the texture of Brendan's hand here, he may have limited ability to block this out. If he can't block the entirety of this damage, he's discarding unless he pays 2. And there's always the opportunity that MajiinBae uses the Amulet of Ice to force another one of those effects, effectively crippling Brendan Patrick's ability to do anything to respond to what MajiinBae's done. So Brendan can go do damage here now. But if he spends his cards in order to play what's in his arsenal or poke with Waning Moon, he won't have the cards to pitch this Arcane Barrier effect. So he might want to empty his hand so the discard effect isn't relevant, Tannon. We'll see.
Yeah, this is what I like to look at with the sweep. Majin has put him in a point where he gets to dictate the terms of engagement. He's like, all right, so I'm going to put this spell, on the stack. This is what's going on. You need to make all of your decisions now, and then I get to see all of your decisions, and I get to decide after that. So this is forcing your opponent to blink first. You may have heard a lot, mirror matches like this. The person who blinks first generally is at a disadvantage. Majin has cards left over in his hand right now. I think he has at least, 1 plus the, so he's got 2, right? The fuse plus the other card.
The Polar Blast, I think,
right.
May be the only card. I'm unsure. He may have kept all of them.
I think he might just have the Polar Blast, right? But this is a blue that's left over. So if Brendan does decide to, go for a bunch of damage here, he's still got A, B up and can do all that. And if not, that's a card that he can put into his arsenal at the end of turn. So Brendan's got to think about all of those things too. What happens here? Does this look like an energy potion is going to come out from Brennan's arsenal here?
Yes, he plays it at instant speed. That's fine. It doesn't generate a frostbite, which also may not be as relevant. And he's pitching 3 into this into Arcane Barrier, which means he takes 2 damage and still suffers the effect here of the Aether Ice Vein, Tannon. You'll need to discard unless he pays 2 now, if I'm not mistaken.
And he is going to pay the 2 off the energy potion, I think, to stop the discard, it looks like. And then his Alluvian Castells is going to go up to a second counter here. Very important stuff in the mirror. So it does look like here comes the amulet. Majin getting a very complicated turn for him here. But since he's already fused his turn, he can sacrifice the Amulet of Ice to make another one of those discard or pay effects that we talk about a lot. Icelander are very good at taxing your opponent. We talk about this a lot. Like, kind of puts him in this spot where, hey, make these decisions. Like, you get to do it. You can either pitch a card or you can pay some resources. It's fine. It's your choice, but none of them are great choices. You have to give up cards every time for one of these.
Yeah, I mean, you spotted it really astutely there, Tannon. That energy potion from Brendan got played at instant speed from his arsenal just to pay for Aether Ice Veins on hit effect. So Brendan didn't want to give up any more cards at all. Now he's in a situation where he said, oh, well, I may as well do all the things that I wanted to do this turn. So little discussion about...
it's kind of like getting to pay from your arsenal, something that you don't really get to do in this game, but he found a way to do it. So it's cheeky little play from Brendan here, but looks like he's still contemplating what to do because of this ice amulet here.
Yeah, so obviously Brendan wants to go into his turn with 1 card in his hand at least. If he is not able to do so, he effectively is going to be locked out of the game and not be able to interact with MajiinBae when theoretically MajiinBae would be looking to find a kill shot pretty soon. Brendan's at quite low life. There are a lot of cards that are very lethal to Brendan. If Brendan will have to discard or pay 2 either way here. So looks like there's probably a pay 2 off that Insidious Chill being pitched, which would leave 1 floating, which doesn't really work for Brendan because he actually has a free poke off Waning Moon anyway because of this Alluvian Constellus being at 2 counters. So hard to be efficient on a turn like this for Brendan. And yeah, he's going to just have to figure it out. He's thinking about maybe leaving the Alluvian counters and paying with a card from his hand. He's planning his next turn already, and yeah, that's the play here. So with that 1 floating, he pitches 1 red into it, and it's just a poke here.
And it does look that is going to be a arsenal from Majin as well. So both players playing with almost perfect information here. You know, he knows what's in Majin's arsenal
Brendan,
here.
he's not arsenaling, I don't think.
Okay.
Brendan
So it
Patrick.
looks like he's pulling. Okay. It's hard to tell exactly what's going on. You're getting back and forth and whose turn is who half the time. I get mixed up a little bit. I apologize.
No, that's fine. I mean, he just didn't put it in his Arsenal zone. Unless
so he left it in his hand?
This is his end step. This might be his end step here, moving to Arsenal. I'm not sure. The Polar Blast gets played out there.
There we go.
Obviously.
Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, the timing mixed up a little bit there.
MajiinBae obviously probably just wanting to get rid of that, I suppose.
They're both just drawing at the same time every time because a lot of the players are just like, hey, pass, like Arsenal pass immediately. So it's hard to keep up. We need to maybe get a actual indicator on the screen here on whose turn it is half the time for this mirror, because this can be
very hard
to
know. Yeah, it's really hard to know in a wizard mirror match, especially even just a match that involves a wizard. Well, I can tell you for free that this is MajiinBae's turn as he's deployed a enlightened strike. No draw, so it's either 7 damage or 5 and go again. The latter seems a little more likely to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're almost threatening all of Brendan's life total here. Brendan at a life total 6 is actually very scary, because if you were to do something like, say, block with a bunch of cards here, and Majin any way to do Arcane plus Waning Moon here, that's a large representation of your turn and all of your cards and all of your life total. So you're going to be most likely going into your own turn with almost no resources left over. So this is the scary spot for Brendan here. He's got to walk a tightrope and try to figure out, you know, what range does Majin have here? Am I allowed to maybe take this damage and then try to do something big in response to something else? But problem is he has to figure out what he can deal with and what he can't. And that's really hard to do from here. It does look like he's going to double block from hand.
Yeah, so that was 7. He takes 1 damage. Still MajiinBae being able to leak damage here is a very good feeling for him. And Brendan's turn looks like a Finals Fighting Spirit for the blue pitch. And again, obviously, being able to gain 1 life from that is rather nice, and also present a fairly robust 7 damage.
Yeah, this is pretty ideal here. This is one of the best plays from Brendan. This is what you saw him kind of set up the turn before, when he was, you know, hey, paying from hand, leaving 1 card over to Arsenal. It was weird to kind of see him use a red from his hand to pay there instead of the Cancelos, but this makes sense now because he knows that, hey, my life total is going to go a lot lower. I can present a very large attack to Majin here and gain a life here. So that's something very good for me. Oh, we got a flurry of things going on for Majin here.
Yeah,
is this going to be enough to kill? It's going to be, it's going to go down to 0. It's going to be Ice Bolt plus the Waning Moon in response here is going to be enough to kill for MajiinBae over Brendan Patrick here.
Yeah, I mean, MajiinBae not even needing to go for Storm Striders on a turn like that. He sees a pretty large amount of 7 damage come in. He knows that Brendan went to 5 there, so he can represent pretty significant amounts of damage with an Ice Bolt coming out of the arsenal. Remember, that's 3 arcane damage, and then, of course, the Waning Moon representing a further 3 damage. Tough one for Brendan there as well. Again, obviously, a few turns where he's legitimately getting his hand pressured. I think the one time, or the first time, that MajiinBae is able to fuse an Ether Ice Vein with, of course, an Amulet of Ice on the field is where it's basically, gone into unwinnable territory for Brendan Patrick. Very, very difficult for him to bounce back from that. And you can see him spending fairly heavily to deploy these attacks. But when you spend heavily to deploy these attacks, that's less cards in your hand to pitch to Arcane Barrier to stop what might be coming back at you there. And Brendan has to have had a sensation that if you're walking into at least some damage on his turn, let alone a potential Storm Strider's activation, which, as we see, not necessary for MajiinBae.
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't necessary for the win there. And yeah, I think it comes down to the exact turn you were talking about. Plus, I think there's some turns where Brendan might have drawn too many red cards in his hand. There was a turn where he had to pay from hand, but it ended up being a red card plus set up his arsenal the next turn, which was a fighting spirit and was a good attack plus gain some life. But at that point, he'd kind of fallen a little too far behind. So instead of going into his turn, pitching a blue and having that attack, he had to just arsenal and pass that turn set. So that took 2 full rotations of the table for him to get that one single attack through instead of being able to do it on his own turn. You talked about this during the match, that efficiency is key in the mirror. You can be anything, be efficient, right? Especially in the mirror. It's so important. And we talked about those super impactful things in the matchup: Alluvian Costellos, Energy Pot, and Frost Hex. Now, Frost Hex didn't come up very big, but if you pay attention to the match from the beginning to the end, one player got to do all of those things before the other player, and that was MajiinBae. And who was the winner of the match? It was also MajiinBae. You know, the physical attacks can be way more impactful than the arcane attacks in the matchup because, you know, you pointed out so aptly that there's so much arcane barrier and Living Castells is so impactful. You want to play around that. Also, you saw MajiinBae doing that more efficiently early in the game too. So I think huge advantage to him there, and you saw it in the win column.
Well, it mattered in that last turn as well, because after that Ice Block comes out of Arsenal for 3, it also creates a Frostbite. So that's just extra damage that's harder and harder for Brendan Patrick to be able to mitigate. So the winner of this match, of course, is MajiinBae, and they will advance to take on the one, the only Isaac Kroot, king of the casino, our only player on Briar in this tournament so far. And that'll be a fantastic matchup to watch. Again, 2 decks that are diametrically opposed in terms of their gameplay paradigms. It's going to be a ton of fun to see that play out. And of course, the winner of that matchup would advance to our semi-finals. So huge congratulations, of course, to MajiinBae, and our commiserations and thanks to Brendan Patrick for competing in the Goliath Gauntlet thus far. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a very quick break. We're going to try and sit by the fire for a little bit, warm up our frigid toes, because coming up, it's going to be Michael Feng taking on Matthew Foulkes in yet another barn burner. Well, it's not barn burner, a barn freezer of a matchup. An Icelander mirror, again, coming your way after this.
The Goliath Gauntlet is brought to you by FAB Cards, where reality and fantasy meet. Go to kfabecards.com for all your Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, and Flesh and Blood needs. FAB Cards. Be who you want to be.
Welcome back, everybody, to the final match of our round of 16 here at the Goliath Gauntlet Flesh and Blood Invitational. I'm Mitch Leslie, joined here again by Matt DeMarco for our second installment of Icelander mirror matches. That's right, we somehow managed to get them back-to-back on the same day. Don't ask me how that happened. It is going to be Matthew Foulkes, Pro Tour 2 champion, going up against Michael Feng, a player with no shortage of accolades to his name either. These 2 players, extremely talented, and I'm really excited that we actually get to see them face off, albeit a little early in the tournament in this Icelander mirror.
But I think that if you're going to be going down that route of like, oh, we didn't want to see these 2 matchups so early, you can say that, frankly, about all the matchups. You know, everybody's bracket seems to be busted early on. I think Ethan Van Sant just went ahead and just absolutely crushed all those degenerate dreams of people looking to really complete the full bracket. But you're right, Matt Foulkes versus Michael Feng is a finals in so many other universes out there. But ultimately, this is a game here where Matt Foulkes, known for deck innovation, for really creating fascinating gameplay, and Michael Feng just for playing very cleanly, for just being consistently good. This is a matchup where in the mirror, frankly, it is going to come down to who blinks first. Whoever, leaves the door open for somebody to walk in, those mistakes that you're prone to making in those long games. And you know that Icelander mirrors are so damn grindy. So it's a buckle up kind of matchup here. It's a, I hope you peed before we hit play, because it's going to be a long haul.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Matthew Foulkes, obviously an innovator of deck lists, clearly having expended all of his creativity on his Pro Tour 2 outing, because he has just copied Michael Hamilton's deck and submitted that. So that's what we've got here. Let's have a look at that one anyway, refresh your memory about what this deck list entails from Matthew Foulkes. Again, pretty standard stuff. We've seen a lot of the sort of talk about Wounded Bull, Finals Fighting Spirit in the list, plus the Enlightened Strike. I'd say the interesting part about this is that there's a 2 of Snatch in the list, which in some cases can be nice to follow up either on its own. Again, it's 4 damage to a card, but also to follow up sometimes a Enlightened Strike, right? One of these big, 5 go again attacks into 4, draw a card, make sure you're guaranteed an Arsenal as Icelander in this matchup. Again, outside of that, very standard cohort. You've got blue and red Ether Ice Veins. Brothers in Arms is also in this list. And again, some of those cards with higher block value may be more relevant in a matchup like this, where both of our opponents we expect are going to be throwing attacks at each other, not just arcane damage. Let's have a look at Michael Feng's list. Like very, very similar, to be sure.
Well, exactly. And when it comes down to certain deck lists, obviously the shell is going to remain the same. The core cards like the Aether Ice Veins, etc. The Channel Lake Frigids, ever since Michael Hamilton started throwing attack actions in there out of his bulk pile, things like Finals, Fighting Spirit, Wounded Bull, there's not much room for innovation when the core package is so good. And this goes all the way back to certain, philosophies and thought processes when Matt Foulkes won the UK National Championships, and we were talking about the deck list, the Cheerios Briar, Tarek's design that Matt Foulkes, it put some work into as well. That deck design, when you're talking about it, I remember discussing it, and I said, okay, what is the sideboard? He said the sideboard can be 20 cracked baubles. It doesn't matter. Your 60 cards are just purely better. Sideboarding in this matchup here, I think if you just go in with the right recipe, it doesn't necessarily matter. This is a matchup here where there's not much room to really counter your opponent, and especially in the mirror. Again, countering your opponent in this mirror is going to be about finding the precise little instant speed window to sort of slide your jam in and get your damage in. So there's going to be a lot of priority passing on both sides, and there's going to be a lot of confusion on the spectator side as to who the hell's turn it is. I know that you and I are going to be struggling the whole way through, brother, but ultimately we're in this together. We're going to hold hands through this experience, and at the end of it, we'll all be singing Kumbaya, and there will be a winner.
Absolutely. Strap yourselves in, ladies and gentlemen, for this matchup. It's your Pro Tour 2 winner, Matthew Foulkes, going up against Calling Cincinnati, battle-hardened Minneapolis champion. It's going to be Michael Feng on the other side of the table. Let's jump in and get this one started. Another Icelander mirror for the agents. Michael Feng already, on his first turn, he deploys that Invitational there and he draws up. So we actually had a handshake after game action taken. We're not going to disqualify for that lack of sportsmanship there. It's clearly just an oversight as these two players acclimate to this online environment. Foulkes, though, is a big online armory grinder. He is I've watched streams of him playing like Viserai in Blitz armories back when he was busted. This guy will do whatever it takes to get his game on. Both players with AB5 here. Just as in the previous matchup, Alluvian Constellus, a very important card.
I'll pitch.
And again, one of the prizes that Matt Foulkes here has been gunning for is, I think it's an additional 27 FPS is on the line for him here, that if he does manage to convert here. But again, we do want to reiterate that a lot of these players are not content creators. They don't have necessarily the hardware or the setup. So the fact that they're just making it work.
I mean, Foulkes tries to be a content creator. He doesn't have that excuse. The guy literally streams his gameplay.
No, his biceps are the content that he creates and really just blasts out there. But I mean, all all about that. Both of you guys are just like, how many times have I just seen you fire up a stream and instead of playing Overwatch or Flesh and Blood, you're out there like bench pressing a Volvo, and like I was like, what are you doing? Like, what is it?
Why? Yeah, 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But that's by the by.
Get that in there, yeah. Which is great because only one of those days intersects with the Goliath Gauntlet, so you can do both on the Fridays. What a double dose of Uber on Friday.
Absolutely. Here it is, a Channel Lake Frigid from Michael Feng, played on his own turn. So again, it will gain a flow counter at the end of Michael's turn. It won't stay around that extra turn as it does in many cases. But in general, Flake, Icelander doesn't actually like to be on the receiving end of this card as much as she loves to play it herself.
No, and this is, again, the beauty of it. It's one of those situations. Everybody has that friend, right? The one that likes to dish out all the fun insults and the jabs and the ribs here and there. But when one comes back their way, they're just like, pardon me, that is rude. And in this case, it feels like that's kind of how Icelander is. Icelander wants to be the one sliding in with the little slight off-color remarks here and there and the poking fun at each other. But as soon as a Channel Lake Frigid is met on their end, it is just pure insult to injury on this case, and as Michael Feng does have that up there, but Icelander's not going to be going, I say quote unquote wide. It's not going to be necessarily doing too many actions. Usually it's about 1 or 2, but it's still attacks that you need to take into account.
You're watching Michael Feng here pitch to that 3 damage from Waning Moon, so he's eaten up all of his arcane. 4 blocked by Meritus Scolding. Or 4 of Emeritus Scolding's damage blocked, rather, and then the same to be said of the Waning Moon. So Michael, again, playing the slow game. There is going to be a flow counter up this turn. It was an ice card in pitch, so Channel Lake Frigid will persist now into Foulkes' turn as Michael Feng doesn't do anything on his turn. He maintains that Arsenal card, and he just draws up to 4. and he's passing the turn back. Unless Foulkes would do anything here, but nothing in Matthew's arsenal right now. So it's more likely we just pass the Foulkes' turn proper, and he'll try and make use of his grip.
When we were doing the casting for the match between Michael Hamilton at the U.S. Nationals, he played in a mirror match. It was Icelander versus Icelander, and again, that match essentially was the slow burn. The fuse was lit early on, but it was such a slow burn until it eventually ended up in massive fireworks. But this is a match, my friends, that I believe we will not see those life totals really deviate from the 30s for, I would say, listen, if I'm going to put an over-under on this, I would say probably the first player to cross down from 30 will probably be at the 20 to 30 minute range of this matchup as it begins. It's a very defensive stance, a very defensive posture both players are going to be looking at here, and both of them are running the same equipment, which is just geared up to stop those red Aether Ice Veins, you know, to stop all the nasty effects that can really stop you down. There's 85.
That's right.
So that is a huge sort of, it pumps the brakes on really accelerating the outcome of this game.
So Michael Feng, his turn consists of in a lightning strike with go again, which Michael represents with that piece of paper. I'd marry you if I wasn't already engaged, Michael. Thank you for that. And then follows it up with an insidious chill, neither of which have lost any of those counters. That represents a lot of cards being yanked out of Foulkes' hand once Feng gets to fusing. But all he does, he just pockets that card, passes the turn over. Now we're waiting to see if Matthew Foulkes intends to act before Michael Feng's turn ends here. No, it looks like Feng was able to draw up
pitch
to
3.
4. And so no Foulkes on his own turn will just deploy a Findel's Fighting Spirit. There's no Channel Lake Frigid in play anymore. That is expired. So this is coming in for 7 damage, costing 3.
Costing 3, but also giving Matt an extra life here, as Matt did go down to 34. And I don't want to say strategically, but taking some damage off the Enlightened Strike. Some of that sting gets soothed by the fact that if you're holding on to a Findel's Fighting Spirit, you can just pitch a blue, which both players will have an abundance of, and just throw 7 damage the old-fashioned way at Michael Feng. Get the extra little, you know, life total boost, the 1-up, as it were, and Michael Feng now on the hook for 7 physical damage, which is, you know, it's, I don't want to say it's a far cry from the 5, but it's, you know, it's just a little above and beyond what Michael Feng opened up with.
All right, so now Feng deciding about his block, or perhaps sequencing of any instant speed actions he actually wants to take here before Foulkes' attack even gets to the blocker's step. All right, so Channel Lake Frigid stuck in front there. This was sideways, usually representing a blocking card.
That's a big one to commit as well. You're talking about the significance of Channel Lake Frigid. One of the best, if not the biggest, majestic rarity card that came out of Tales of Aria. And as that set ages, Uber, I love it more and more. I loved it. It's still my favorite set that has in print currently. And you just kind of give it a little review, you know, in the rearview mirror and look at some of the gems that have come out of it. And speaking gems, we're going to pitch a Fyendel's, the Heart of Fyendel right there. And I was, booyah. Again, look, both players are just happy to take some damage because they know that they're going to eventually get it back. And these games that go the distance, a card like Fyendel's, the Heart of Fyendel, will see a second and maybe even a third cycle. So that card representing blue pitch, but also potentially 2 or even more, 3 life.
Yeah, like that card, Findel's Fighting Spirit, may as well be a 3 for 9. It's, you know, it's healing too, so you consider that effective damage there. Which, so 2 cards for 9 damage, I use with air quotes, is unbelievably good rate. Obviously,
I'm off for 6, sorry. I'm off for 6.
Very, very nice little play there. And Foulkes says, well, this is pretty considerable amount of damage. Really, both these players trying to play slow, play steady. So Foulkes will take the 1 damage blocking with the blue Aether Ice Vein and putting one of his own Channel Lake Frigids in front of that attack. And the suspense builds because there's been no fusing from Michael Feng. In fact, both these wizards are beginning the fight by maintaining their mana and just trying to belt each other around the face with these physical attacks. Here's an Enlightened Strike out of hand for Matthew Foulkes.
Enlightened Strike is a big one. And again, there's so much hocus pocus that both of these players can kind of, the rabbits that they have access to in their proverbial hats. But when it comes down to it, I believe it was Mike Tyson who said that, you know, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And in this case, Enlightened Strike and Find Those Fighting Spirits, it's all been physical right now. I think we've only seen one instance of arcane damage. It was a Waning Moon that came through on Matt Foulkes' side. But again, we've mentioned this, with 5 AB at players' disposal, Waning Moons are just a blue pitch away from being completely nullified and bogus. So what's happening right here, Michael Feng is going to be playing out of the arsenal, finally using some of that ability, one of the the hero ability of Icelander, saying that if there's a blue action card in your arsenal, you can play it at instant speed. If it's ice, create a frostbite. Now, the mode selected here by Matt Foulkes, we do not know, but I would suspect that if there is a frostbite token being played here, I would suspect that that's a go again off of the Enlightened Strike, unless he just decided to go tall here.
Yeah, well, I think he blocked with 2 cards in the prior turn, so this Enlightened Strike may have even been a draw here to make sure that Foulkes, with coming in with a 2-card hand, would still have an arsenal something if he wanted to. So obviously pretty important for Icelander. If you don't have an arsenal card, you cannot act on your opponent's turn.
What?
As far as we can tell,
Yeah.
I guess the Foulkes making sure he knows he has a frostbite here. That being represented by Feng. And this is going to be an ice bolt put in front of this one here. So we'll know what mode this was selected here, but if it's 2 damage taken, then yeah, it looks like it might actually have been sink and drool.
Frostbite.
Right.
Goes.
In this case, it was... Yeah, we're going to just go ahead and pocket the card. Matt Foulkes here does have the arsenal. Michael Feng, it's turn to you. And we're going to go ahead, pitch blue, fuse a red Aether Ice Vein. This one will come in for 5 arcane on hit, discard or pay 2. This is going to be nasty because it's not just the Aether Ice Vein Uber. There's so much more to the story.
Right, absolutely. So Aether Ice Vein on hit will have a discard unless you pay 2 effect. But what happens first is those 2 Insidious Chills in sequence will trigger. This is a compulsory trigger if you fuse. So Feng knew this would happen. That's why he fused in order to activate these. So Matthew Foulkes is dealing with 2 instances first up of discard unless you pay 2. And he knows that there might be a 3rd instance with that Amulet of Ice. So look, pitching 2 blues here is probably the best. It would mean he'd have 2 more floating and would make it pointless for Michael Feng to use that Amulet of Ice, as you just have 2 pitch floating and you'd be able to, come in with a Waning Moon, at least force some damage on that turn. But again, and then after those are dealt with, then there's the 5 damage up front and another discard unless you pay 2 effect that's baked into that Aether Ice Vein. Foulkes may not have the pitch to stop that damage coming through. In theory, he has to pay... So 5 pitch from the arcane damage to block it, and then 4 more pitch from the 2 discard unless you pay 2 effects, and then 2 more pitch. So that is 11 resources to try and answer all of these effects this turn. First of all, it's going to be a cold snap from Arsenal. It's going to apply frostbite. This is also going to allow Matthew Foulkes to replace that card. Michael Feng's Arsenal will get frozen if he doesn't pay 1. He doesn't have 1 right now, so that effect not relevant.
But drawing a card out from the effect of playing that from the arsenal, pitching the 2, you'll be able to recover a card here, so that could help pay for certain of those detrimental effects. And like you mentioned, you need a metric ass load of resources in your back pocket to pay for all of this.
Junk in the trunk. Yeah.
Big time. Absolutely. And frankly, unless he, invested in Apple in the 90s, I don't think he's got enough to pay for everything here and have some jam left over. So I think it's a matter in this case of just kind of saying, well, this is one of your big turns. And I might just be happy here absorbing the damage and letting all of those discard or pay triggers just fizzle. And at the end of the day, I'll draw up. I won't have an arsenal, but silver lining here for Matt is taking no damage and seeing some of those Insidious Chill counters just decay.
We haven't got to the Aether Ice Vein yet, so he's just dealt with those 2 discard unless you pay 2 effects. Looks like 1 being pitched to the Illuvian Constellus, blocking 1. That still means there's 4 arcane damage hanging over Matthew Foulkes' head at the moment. And remember, he needs to keep a card in hand if he wants to be able to play the game as Icelander.
Yeah, and then the trigger happens.
Perform instant speed
moves
from his arsenal. So yeah, he just says, I'll take 4, and then I have to deal with the discard unless I pay 2 effect of that Aether Ice Vein now. Devastating turn. The question is, though, what can Michael Feng do with the tempo advantage he gains from this? Sometimes it's not always easy to press your advantage. You just may not draw up into the cards you need. So A lot still hinges on Michael. He'll probably he'll arsenal this Frost Hex at the end of his turn and draw up, and we'll see what he can do after the fact. But that's a discard.
Yep.
That was a snatch being thrown into Foulkes' graveyard. So just the one card left in hand, and he took all 4 of that damage flag.
In which case, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world here. It's if Matt Foulkes' turn is literally just to arsenal and draw up, there's an opportunity here for you know, some retribution down the line, as Matt Foulkes is going to go down to 30, Michael Feng at 29, and both players. When I said over under, I meant both players. This is a little revisionist history for you here. I'm trying to. Okay, so nobody's paid attention to what I say, anyways. However, a lot of this matchup here involves getting some of those stacking effects, like the 2 Insidious Chills, and having some of the cards like the Ice Amulet on the board as well. So, but another Findel's Fighting Spirit. Yeah,
I mean, this is great. Something that we sort of neglected to mention last turn is that because he played the Cold Snap out of Arsenal, he got to draw another card. So Foulkes actually ended the turn with 2 cards, not 1. He can't Arsenal, right? That's the decision he has to make. He can't Arsenal that Amulet of Ice. Instead, though, he can still threaten 7 damage going across the table to Michael Feng, which having 3 cards stripped from your hand and still being able to present an attack for 7 is very, very good. So without the Cold Snap, Matthew Foulkes cannot do this, and he's able to leak 1 damage through. Feng, of course, all he's going to do is deploy that Frost Hex from his arsenal, creating a Frostbite. Again, that would represent 1 arcane damage to Foulkes if his turn ends and that Frostbite's still up, and that's he's deciding whether to take that now, and yes, ticks that down.
Go ahead.
And that will be Matthew Foulkes' turn.
After they banned the Pulse of Eisenloft, let's get real. The Findel's Fighting Spirit is actually the superior card to Oakenold. Let's be real. It's a 3 for 7.
Represents 2 cards from your opponent's hand.
And gains you a life. So let talk, and you can put it in any deck. Let's get real here, friends. Oakenold is old news. And as it is right now, as you can see, Michael Feng showing the entire garage sale of wonderful items here at his disposal. None of them for sale, however.
No, this is not. Khajiit may have wares, but they are not for sale. Presently.
Absolutely not.
They are important adornments.
When my grandmother used to have garage sales when I was young, and I used to always be tasked to go and help out, no matter what she had put on the table, nothing was for sale. People would show up and be like, oh, this lamp is nice, and $5, no problem. And then you know what? I changed my mind. I want to keep it. Basically, she just wanted to show off the cool stuff she had, and nothing was ever for sale.
I mean, this one is interesting, though.
Yeah.
If I saw this for sale as a curio, I might get it appraised. This is a Polar Blast from hand from Foulkes here. Obviously, this says pay 1 or my next attack gains dominate. Which it could be nice. Obviously, crucially, it draws a card. So much like Cold Snap, Polar Blast is desirable because it replaces itself and it creates a Frostbite against your opponent for just the 1. Now, I don't know if the actual main body of the text of this card is going to be relevant this turn. Feng is deliberating. Okay, so he didn't pay. So this is a snatch, a red snatch with dominate. But have a look at this. Brothers in Arms. Now, if Feng pitches 2 Brothers in Arms as effect, he can actually block this out, even though it has dominate. When you defend with Brothers in Arms, you can pay 1. And if you do, it gains 2 block value. So it goes up to 4 block. And yeah, he eats up the dominated snatch with 1 card.
Incredible. Matt Foulkes comes in here with such an unorthodox, move here. And Matt Foulkes and playing Snatch, like, he loves that card. But let's be real here. When you come in with a Polar Blast onto Snatch with an Icelander as your hero, you're basically saying, hey, what do you like Michael Bolton? And Michael Feng just came back with I celebrate the man's entire catalog and jams out the 4 block the fun way. Matt Foulkes just found, unfortunately, he thought he had such an interesting and unique recipe, but Michael Feng was just completely prepared for that one, as cards like Brothers in Arms are so versatile, and in terms of draft, they often get snatched quite early. They're not the best picks, obviously, but they're quite desirable in the blue under blue category.
Absolutely. He ain't heavy. He's my brother in arms. And this is Michael Feng with a red Ether Ice Vein with the, again, 2 counters coming off those Insidious Chills here. So 2 instances of discard unless you pay 2 effects. Foulkes here is just, he can't be happy about this one, that's for sure. So he'll need to decide here how he's just pitching first to these effects. So if I'm not mistaken, this will be 2 floating. Yep. So he's paying for both of those Insidious Chill effects. And there's the minor issue of the Ether Ice Fang screeching across the table at him for 5. And looks like we have another blue pitched here. So representing a block 5 if this is all of it being spent.
Yeah, you have the means to block these, which is oftentimes not what most heroes do not have the capability to just completely stuff an Aether Ice Vein red like that. As it's frankly a lot of the heavy lifting here is going to be done by the Storm Striders. They do have Arcane Barrier 2, so you're paying there. But we're going to go ahead and come back here as
nice.
out of Arsenal. There's the Cold Snap, one of those non-attack actions that, like you said, have a replacement effect in the sense that if played from Arsenal, you're drawing a card. So pitch a blue, get 2 floating resources. You got plenty more to go ahead and create some jam here. As a Waning Moon is the answer on Matt Foulkes' side.
Yeah, I mean, he has 2 left over from paying for this Cold Snap, which draws him a card. So Foulkes gets to guarantee an Arsenal card if it's good enough to go there, and threaten 3 damage without having to spend an Alluvian Constellar's counter in order to do that. Feng now looks like he just pitched his Cold Snap to stop that arcane damage coming in, which obviously does mean that he doesn't. He just moves to draw. He doesn't get to Arsenal a card. So an opportunity for Foulkes to make something happen, but bearing in mind he spent everything, so his turn will go by, I assume, with having done very little. That was the Frostbite expiring on Feng's side, which is going to do 1 damage to him because, much like Feng, Foulkes has a Frost Hex in play. I believe Foulkes' turn looks like a pass and move to draw step. Feng won't be interacting because he doesn't have an Arsenal card right now.
A game of attrition, Icelander versus Icelander, finding those small little margins to go ahead and sneak through with some damage are going to be clutch here, as both players have to be vigilant about, leaving the door wide open. You might, swing in with the haymaker, but if you're too close to the edge, Storm Striders are essentially going to be constantly haunting you and in the back of your mind. But we're not anywhere close to that juncture, as both players have kind of been poking and prodding and scratching and clawing for every little advantage they can get here. And ultimately, as we've seen, not much has gone through. Both players have presented some hefty attacks, but the life gain and the effective blocking has made this a slow grind. But that's what you got to expect in these Icelander mirrors.
So this is an Ice Eternal not fused. For X equals 3, I suppose. We have 6 in the pitch there between Hypothermia and Emeritus Scalding. So X is 3, and it will create X Frostbites, 3 Frostbites under target hero's control. It wasn't fused, so Feng doesn't get the extra sort of X damage that comes along with that. Interesting to deploy this on his sort of turn, and Foulkes undoubtedly has the ability to sort of eat much of this damage. First of all, though, the Frostbites come in and...
Right, the Frostbites that come in here, there are ways to actually get around this. What Matt Foulkes can do here is just allow those to hit the table. And then rather than respond to the card being played, you let it resolve, and then you create your action. So I think what Michael Feng is gambling on here is that you are damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You either respond to this with the cards you have, and then the Frostbites exist at the end of your turn and deal damage through Frost Hex, or you let it resolve. And I'm trying to hope that you do not have the resources necessary to pay through the Frostbites to activate your Icelander. So Michael Feng here taking, there is a way out here, but Matt Foulkes needs to be able to pay through the Frostbites.
Yeah, obviously he has Alluvian Constellar, so he pays through the Frostbites with Wounded Bull here. Obviously they only would disappear at the end of Foulkes' turn. So I think at least he's indicating that that's what he intends to do here. Alluvian Constellus, I mean, these 2 players are keeping counters on their chess pieces. Also, that instant ability is a conduit. It's an outlet for you to pay through Frostbites as well, because it's free. But, you would just pay 3 to activate your Constellus to sort of do 3 damage. So it's not the worst at all. Fairly efficient way. A lot of other players in the Icelander matchup, use their Spring Tunic counter for that exact same reason. Use something to pay into to get rid of Frostbites. So Foulkes drops Wounded Bull here, and as far as we can tell, he's paying 6 for it. So this all seems fine to me. He may have given Feng a priority window, though, or Feng may have asked him to just wait. So we'll see what the decision is there. But this would theoretically present at 7 damage and also blow through the Frosty Boys.
So much to keep track of here, most importantly of who the hell's turn it is, as frankly, nothing matters anymore. Up is down, left is right, cats are dogs, and I have just seen a wounded bull being played. So that is your indicator, friends. That is the beacon of light, the lighthouse on the foggy waters, knowing that it has to be Matt Foulkes' turn because there's no other legal way to play that card. So Matt Foulkes presenting a wounded bull here at not at less life, so that'll be coming in as just a standard 7. Could have been an 8. That ain't the case now. Michael Feng does have the advantage/disadvantage of having less life here. So call it what you will, but frankly, anyone's game is we have been kind of going at a very, I wouldn't call it a slow pace. The play has been quite, brisk. However, it's what actually gets punched through and the amount of triggers.
Okay, so there's a lot going on here. First of all, it's a fused Ice Eternal for 3, so it would create 3 Frostbites. But don't worry about that because first there's 2 instances of discard unless you pay 2 effects that are on the stack, and that's the first thing that Foulkes has to sort of respond to. It looks like.
So he took the 3 Arcane from the fusion. He's just letting that sneak through.
Yes.
Now that actually has the added benefit of creating giving Wounded Bull 1 extra attack now.
That is true. Yeah, Foulkes looks like the ordering in which this is happening is interesting. Yeah, Foulkes, it's not 6 Frostbites because he technically pays through 3 of them to make this attack happen. So the order in which these effects are being resolved is interesting. I guess Foulkes probably has an empty hand, so those 2 discard unless you pay 3 effects actually not relevant. That's best I can tell. That's actually what's happened there. So that's pretty easy to sort through then. That's why Feng also not opting to use the amulet, and he just blocks with that Enlightened Strike. So still taking fairly healthy amount of damage. Like you said, Wounded Bull was up to 8 there, right? So Feng is only able to block 3 of that, still has to take 5. And then towards the end of the turn, Foulkes just has to eat that 3 damage because he's got no way to get rid of the Frostbites.
On Matt Foulkes' side here, looking at across the board, it looks a lot less cluttered, a lot less populated as both of those Insidious Chills are now expended, and I don't believe there's any way for Michael Feng. Nothing's coming back. So that is something that you can keep in the back of your mind. Those are not coming back. So there is still an Ice Amulet and a Frost Hex. Again, nothing really to deal with those, frankly, for either of these players. Nothing in the toolbox to deal with it. It's just a reality you're going to have to live with. They're going to just hang over you like this Blood Moon that is just, watching you and waiting for the proper opportunity for Michael Feng or Matt Foulkes to just go full Werewolf Moon and start clawing back into this game. But again, the X Factor Uber is going to be those Storm Striders.
Exactly. You're going to see these 2 life totals get walked down until one player tries to make the move and we have a flurry of action. And normally, that player blinking first is at a disadvantage. So that's worth bearing in mind here. This is so Meritus Scolding coming out here from Matthew Foulkes.
I like that. All right, Meritus Scolding. And again, going up here. Matt Foulkes, not a vanity player, not somebody. We've seen so many people in this tournament with altered cards and cold foils and gold foils and all kinds of cool stuff. Matt Foulkes took wanted to bring Prism to a tournament, did not have Phantasmal Footsteps. Clock was ticking, went out, found one for like 50 bones because it was like exceptionally damaged. Doesn't matter. It's legal to play. Who cares? I said, Matt, the ultimate pro move is you show up to the tournament, you set your equipment down, and you pull out your wallet and pull out a folded Phantasmal Footsteps and put it on the board, and then you keep your track of your score on it. That's the ultimate Chad move. But
yes, cards are just a tool to Foulkes. I don't think he really cares too much about the foiling out or swagging out his collection. He's very much just interested in using them as pieces in order to win the game, and that's paid off for him so far. I think that's safe to say.
His Heart of Findel, if I'm not mistaken, he was using it as a bookmark for when he was reading. I think the book he was reading was Rich Dad, Chad Dad. I think what he was reading. Yeah, so that's what he was kind of. So that's both. Why not both? That's what he's trying to do. He's going to actually read it and come out with like the rebuttal, the Matt Foulkes rebuttal, which is what if I told you you could be both?
I can't wait for that one. Is it going to be written by himself or his publicist? That's the real question. I need it straight from Foulkes' mouth. I can't do it with any adaptation or any creative license. It's got to be Matthew Foulkes.
I didn't want to spill the beans, but I'm actually ghostwriting it for him. So
okay. That's fine for me. Folks, so what we saw in Emeritus scolding at Michael Feng before Feng was about to move to Arsenal the Frost Hex. Feng instead just pitches the Frost Hex to eat, some of that damage. So he goes down to 18. So then he went to draw. He's drawn up, and now Michael Foulkes' turn consists of an Enlightened Strike rattling across the table for 7.
Michael Feng doing the pro move here of actually indicating the amount of the attack, which is 7 there ahead of Matt Foulkes there. I believe Matt Foulkes, the dice he was using were way too large, so he's running out of options here. And in this case, Michael Feng trying to block out. And again, man, the nice mix of attacks here, as we see on both sides, the 7 attack E-Strike being met by a 7 attack Finals Fighting Spirit, adding life to Michael Feng's total here. This is what's so beautiful about this design. It's that typically when you know what's coming, you can always prepare for it. And Icelander would always show up to the party with really as a one-hit wonder. It's going to be Frostbites and Arcane Damage mixed together. But now when you're able to dig into that bag of party tricks and come out with a 7 attack, you know, that those super tall in a deck that really runs so many blues that paying for that is not really an issue. It becomes a lot more, you know, cumbersome for players to navigate, as Michael Feng here is just kind of matching hit for hit.
Yep.
And 7 attack with the +1 on the life total is helpful. And Michael Feng, again, they're going to be fanning out the graveyards. And at this juncture, Uber, knowing what's left is just as crucial as the life total discrepancy as well.
Yeah, Feng checking his own graveyard there just to make sure he understands how many duplicates of some of these cards are available. You may as well be a 40 life hero as Icelander with all these life gain effects between Heart of Final, Finals Fighting Spirit, and all that. It's a big deal. Ice Bowl will be the block from Matthew Foulkes here, which would only chew through 3 of the damage. He may consider adding a second card to that pile. And it's going to be a sink below here. So, yeah, these defense reactions actually having some degree of relevance in the Icelander matchup nowadays, whereas in the past they were sat in the sideboard here, chewing through, again, more of this physical damage. So Feng's attack is going to get stuffed here.
Players still tailoring these decks. Again, the beauty of this game is that from week to week, you know, things change and you need to adapt. I'm a firm believer of the fact that if you show up to a tournament, you're not necessarily showing up with the best deck that you saw. What you're doing is you're showing up to the best deck last week, and things can change in a heartbeat, as we could see over here. Now Matt Foulkes is responding with a blue Aether Hail out of the arsenal. That's going to represent 2 arcane damage as well as a Frostbite, but responding to that on top of it, hey, let's go throw a Waning Moon as well.
Yeah, 5 damage in total here. Foulkes able to deploy these both off of 1 blue pitched there, taking Michael Feng down to 9 life, which is a little bit scary for your player on the right-hand side. It does mean that if there's any play that involves these Storm Striders, things can get a little bit out of hand. Now, bear in mind, neither of these decks are using the traditional Icelander package that involves things like Freezing Point, the quote-unquote the combo. So sometimes these Storm Striders really are just to get an extra non-attack action in on your opponent's turn and sort of force more answers, especially if your opponent burns through all their cards pitching and playing effects. So keep that in mind now, as Michael Feng more happy to sort of take that sort of 5 damage on his own turn. Arsenal card. Looks like Foulkes here just opting to move to his draw step. And again, these players know that that's the only, if they're not going to do anything on their turn, that is the only priority window that their opponent can make use of. Michael Feng here asking Foulkes maybe just to hold his horses for a moment as he decides what comes out here. No, it is Feng's turn, pardon me. And so he's
we don't know, man. We don't know. It could be our turn. We have no freaking idea. And both players would be completely legal to play all these cards because that's what this hero does. This is why Wizard, is such a fascinating hero. And you and I, you were on the stack this week, and I asked you, I said, is Wizard the most hated of all heroes? And honestly, I think that it might be the most frustrating because you never have a game plan. You never have a reliable, course of action that you can take when you're fighting against the Wizard, because at the drop of a hat, they can decide that they're in charge and they're making all this happen. Now, it is worth noting over here, Michael Feng at 9 life is right on the edge of a Storm Strider lethal. So he's going to have to start protecting his life total, because at a certain juncture, he's going to have to be playing a lot more conservative so that he's not blown out of the water from a response by the Storm Striders. However, if you play conservative, you're never really pressuring Matt Foulkes enough that you know, you will potentially swing the momentum of this game and get it back in your grasp. So a tough reality for Michael Feng here, but looking at what Matt Foulkes has, you know, what can he play at instant speed to really close out the game? You can maybe go nodes. You could pop your nodes, go with Aether Ice Vein, and then follow up with a Waning Moon. But that is under the impression that Michael Feng has no cards left and no way to mitigate that damage.
Yeah, still represent 10 damage though. That does hurt for sure. Feng, if he has a large physical attack to follow up this Enlightened Strike, it could be pretty nice. Again, choosing Go again absolutely means that there's more where that came from. It's just an Aether Ice Vein from Foulkes to block. Something that Feng should be pretty happy to see in general, because that's definitely where, you know, Foulkes is going to try and rely on to sort of go big. Bear in mind, Feng has been able to inflict 6 or more than 6 instances of discard unless you pay 2 on-hit effects against Matthew Foulkes here. So an energy potion to follow up here. Feng's still of the mindset of trying to set up as he deploys that there and pays through the frostbite he's given. Normally, you know, pitching for an energy potion is obviously strange, but Feng doesn't need to end the turn with any cards in his hand. He already has an arsenal. Anything more than just the arsenal is unnecessary for him. He wants to draw up a full grip here and make sure he's got some presence on board. So Epot, Amulet of Ice, Frost Hex, all there. Looks like Matthew Foulkes hoping to poke at Feng here during his turn. It looks like some of that will be eaten up, but only 2 of it as we go to 4 Constella's counters, and Feng takes 1 leak damage from that Waning Moon.
Matt Foulkes' mission here now is to protect his own life total while still eroding some of Michael Feng's, knowing, again, that the 2 of the Insidious Chills are gone. There's only 1 Frost Hex on the board. So it's a matter now, if Matt Foulkes finds the right recipe of firing off those Metacarpus notes, he might be able to find that lethal. But it's going to be... you're going to need the right wind speed, you know, the right thermals on your wings to get that kind of flight. So we're not quite there yet. It's not a matter of, all right, well, any Guardian attack is huge. I'm just going to dominate it and kill my opponent. You need the precise, you know, you need to find that right frequency here. So Matt Foulkes is going to be protecting the life total, pressuring where he can, because Michael Feng at 8 is in lethal range within the right, you know, within the right environment, within the right circumstances. But the lower you get, the wider the options become for Matt Foulkes to close this game out. And opening with a Enlightened Strike here is a nice way to start the game.
Yeah, you got to block with 2 cards here. Really depends on what the mode is. Okay, so leaking 1 damage means that Matthew Foulkes chooses +2 on the Enlightened Strike, getting a 7 damage attack. Michael Feng says, I can only really block sort of 6 of this efficiently, so that's how it's going to go. And on his turn, it's going to be a Wounded Bull coming out for 8. Again, getting that extra little bit of value as Feng is behind in life. Michael Feng obviously doesn't opt to act on Matthew Foulkes' turn here, so just wants to present a big attack of his own. And yeah, this is very relevant for Foulkes. This is accounting for, you know, almost half of his life in 1 hit.
Well, we need to also... I mean, so here's the part too. Is that card in Michael Feng? Is that in his hand or is that in his arsenal?
That Wounded Ball came out of Michael Feng's arsenal on his turn.
So he's got 1 in hand. Okay, because I was going to say that if there's nothing left in his hand, Matt Foulkes could just go ahead and pop the Stormstriders here and blow Michael Feng out of the water if he has the right cards, if that's the case. But it looks like what he's doing here is he's going to start just counterattacking, but that Wounded Bull for 8 is going to open up the game here. If a lot of that gets through, Michael Feng will start to be able to sort of, you know, he's going to be in that, all right, let's play some chicken, you know, like who wants to blink first, like you mentioned earlier, Uber. Stormstriders are this, you know, this overlording reality for both players that they are not safe at any juncture of this game if their life totals gets beyond that safety zone. Matt Foulkes is within that safety net right now.
So this is before the Frostbite comes down. In response, Feng activates his energy potion. This is probably to eat up that damage, yeah, from the Aether Hail. Again, we'll get him a Constella's counter as one of that arcane damage is going to be prevented by the chess piece. And that's and then the Frostbite comes into play. So Feng just making sure he doesn't have to pay to activate his own energy potion, which would be quite frustrating. The fact of the matter is, Feng would still have to pitch another card to sort of try and find a way to pay through the Frostbite that he has. And I'm not so sure if he's inclined to do so with only 1 card left in his hand. But still, there's the issue right now of the Wounded Bull on deck. And Foulkes has to decide how he wants to block that. May not have a whole lot of cards in order to do so. This is 8 damage, meeting 3 block right now.
So 5 is going to leak through over here. Matt Foulkes, I
Ooh,
think,
my
is
God.
happy to take it. Again, safety zone is okay here, but we're in that critical juncture of the game where it's going to get nasty. But you're right. Timing is so crucial, and being able to respond to all these little windows of opportunity for both players. Priority is so important in the mirror that, like you said, Michael Feng responding to the trigger to pop the energy potion to float it. It's a small gain. It's a small little edge that you're doing, but every little percentage points matter here, because if he did let that window pass, it would have been more expensive. It would have been less
Oh,
efficient, but he's going to
he's
have
got
to
a
do it
pitch
here.
to it. Yeah. I mean, that is significant. Michael Feng denying himself an Arsenal card on his turn in order to block out that waning moon damage. He still takes 1 damage from the frostbite expiring at the end of his turn. So Foulkes forces Feng out of an instant speed action on Foulkes' turn and leaks the damage via that frostbite in. Got to be feeling pretty good now with a 6 life lead as Michael Feng passes back with no cards in his arsenal. It's a scar for a scar coming out from Matthew Foulkes. Again, this does not have go again because Foulkes has more life.
The old-fashioned way, but it's still something that needs a response. Michael Feng at 2 is in lethal range from something as unassuming as a waning moon. So you're gonna need a response here. But again, not having an arsenal, these are the realities that a lot of Icelander players feel when they're playing limited. When you're playing draft, you feel like you're on top of the world with Icelander until you lose an opportunity to play to have an Arsenal card that is blue. That's when things start to come crashing down, and your whole game plan it just crumbles like a house of cards. And right now, Michael Feng is facing that reality. But a potent counterattack and a good drop is going to be good. And Wounded Bull, like you just said here, is huge.
Now, how are we paying for this, Mr. Feng? No such thing as a free lunch, especially of the quadrupedal variety.
I don't think he wants a free lunch from the UK. They're not known for their
fish and chips, mate. That shit's fire. It's absolutely fire. Putting it out there. That's something I'll happily eat tons of from the UK, although Nando's is mad overrated. So Feng holding a card back here, knowing that Foulkes is going to try and prod and poke here. There's an Arsenal card plus Waning Moon. There's a lot of arcane damage potential on Matthew Foulkes' side of the board here.
I forgot to mention this match brought to you by Nando's. Come get our fish and chips and don't listen to Uber.
They don't have fish and chips.
I don't know what you're talking about.
For kayfabe cards, by the way, actually sponsoring this event, getting shoved aside for Nando's. Big
and
shout out
it's Fernando's, but you know what? I swear to God, if kayfabe ever served fish and chips, they would be freaking incredible. Championship belt holding, title holding level tier.
You mean championship, right?
Fish and champion chips. Tables, ladders, and tartar sauce. That's so good. Delicious. All right. Well, the reality here is that Matt Foulkes is at 12. Michael Feng at 5. No Arsenal card for Michael Feng, but that is a 8-point Wounded Bull that is being presented towards Matt Foulkes, and it needs respect here, because should you just decide to take this because you think you've got lethal, well, yeah, Stormstriders, yeah, it's a choose your own adventure that doesn't have a happy ending. So you're going to have to respect this. Cards like Wounded Bull, I promise you, there's one of them that's leveling out a coffee table in your apartment right now. They are strong cards that just came out of nowhere, it seems.
Oh my goodness. It's a 3-card block from hand for Foulkes. Now, that Finals Fighting Spirit only blocks for 2, and he doesn't gain the life from blocking with it. So that is an 8 damage block from 3 cards. Feng says, okay, is my opponent going to do anything? Move to draw step? Arsenal a card? Bueller? No? Okay. Whew. Stay of execution, perhaps, as Foulkes presents another Scar for a Scar for 4 damage, no go again.
Well, these are cards, Scar for a Scar, that you'd think are just, they're such saving graces. They're such, catch-up cards when things are kind of going tits up. But in this case, Matt Foulkes is in a commanding lead. So cards like Scar for a Scar are just 4. They cost nothing. It's 4 damage, absolutely. And at this juncture, Michael Feng's going to have to respect it at 5 life. I think what Matt Foulkes is doing here is saying, I can win this game off of attrition, off of playing ice cards, playing off my opponent's turn, giving him frostbites. It is. However, it's a matter right now of resource management and who can be the most efficient with what they've got.
Yeah, Foulkes has 1 card in his hand. So if Feng decides to go, for lack of a better term, ape shit right now, based on what's
scientific
in his hand,
ape shit, absolutely.
Yeah, and what he does with those Stormstriders, it could be scary for Foulkes. 12 life is, you can never feel safe there. And Foulkes obviously is only able to keep one card in his hand, plus that scar for a scar. This is not compelling from Foulkes in terms of pressuring that advantage that he has, at least on paper, right? He probably wants to find other ways to force Michael to part with cards, as opposed, like a good block here from Michael is like block with one card and maybe one damage gets leaked through. But you can see there's a pause here, right? An audible pause, even though we don't have any sound from this VOD, because Michael Feng is going, right, is this time for me to reach for the Avada Kedavra, for the unforgivable curse? Is it time for me to now to try and bring out the big guns? Because I'm getting too low. I can do a lot of stuff on my opponent's turn. I've got Waning Moon for free here. I've got an Arsenal card and a Storm Strider's activation. I'm holding on to a lot of cards as well. My opponent let me draw a full grip without doing anything to me on my end step, which is absolutely huge. It's again, that in and of itself represents a bit of a loss of tempo there. So Michael, again, a lot to think about. He's splitting his cards into piles. That always scares me. When my opponents start, counting on their fingers, moving their cards around, I'm like, oh goodness, please don't do this.
Oh, totally. Or my biggest one is when the players are like make lunch plans like during the game. I'm like, you don't know when you're getting out of here.
I used to do that whenever I'd queue into a prism. Yeah, I'd just go and make lunch plans. But that was more because I was just going to forfeit the game or just lose instantly and then go.
This is that you queue up and like their buddy comes through. It's like, oh, we're going to wherever, and we're going to Fernando. No one goes to Fernando's. They're going to kayfabecards.com. While they're browsing Uber Eats, but ultimately, and they're just saying things like, "Oh yeah, we're going to head out there," and the guy's like, "Oh, don't worry, just I'll be there shortly," and you don't know what the hell that means,
That's so cheese. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. In this case over here, though, both players, like we mentioned, Storm Striders, we're approaching the well actually phase of the game where one player is going to play something and the other one's going to say, well, actually, and then the other one's going to say, well, actually.
Yeah,
so
pushes the glasses up the bridge of the nose moment,
Yeah, the greasiness just allows for a frictionless slide of the glasses right up the bridge of your nose, just to really drive it home that Gandalf was the superior wizard, but not in this case because both of them are playing Icelander and they have the same the same nastiness at their disposal. But frankly, again, those Storm Striders are these live grenades that are going to explode at some point soon.
Okay, so we can talk lines a little bit here. Feng obviously has a free. He obviously has a free attack off this Illuvian Constellus if he wants to make it. So let's assume 3 damage there. I think that's 3 cards in hand from Feng. A little bit hard to say. Oh, he's got 4 cards in his hand.
4, 2 piles. He's like feng shuiing his whole mat here.
Okay, here it is. Here's the pitch. It's a gigantic Isoternal. So it's fused straight off the bat. And we have an activation of the Amulet of Ice. So first of all, Mr. Foulkes, discard unless you pay 2. That means no Arsenal card for Matthew Foulkes here. He's going to discard it. It was obviously a red. Now, there's going to be 3 Frostbites and 3 damage coming down from this Isoternal. This is before blocks, might I add.
Okay, so keep in mind as well, if there is an opportunity here that, depending on what the damage that's being presented here, there's a card still left in Michael Feng's hand. No, sorry, that's his Arsenal card, if I'm not mistaken.
No. You. I think you're right. That is a card left in hand. He had 4 cards in hand.
Right, but 2 were pitched for Isoternal with the fusion of the Frost Hex. So
I think that Frost Hex was actually blocking the Scar for a Scar. It was.
Okay.
So he fused with it and then he blocked with it, and now he pokes with that Waning Moon. So Foulkes got to suffer some damage here. 3 damage taken there, presumably from the Waning Moon. He's got no cards in his hand, so he can't do a damn thing about this damage coming his way. There's actually a backbreaker, and then he'll take 3 damage at the end of his turn from the Frostbites expiring. Michael Feng able to come out and top in that trade significantly, forcing 9 damage virtually that turn. 3 from Isoternal, 3 from the Frostbites expiring, 3 from a free Waning Moon attack. Matthew Foulkes only gets 1 damage, has no Arsenal card, and that could be his back completely broken as Michael Feng has that card still in his hand. And I mean, good chance we know where that's going when it comes back to his turn.
Well, here we go. Again, the well actuallys have just kind of expired at this point, but there's still these 2 massive landmines that both players are trying to just sort of tiptoe around. The Storm Striders can be popped at any time to make things really nasty, and that becomes a stack that is that gets very tall and very aggressive. But look at this. This was a situation, that turn that started with Matt Foulkes at 12 and Michael Feng at 5, with Matt presenting 4 damage. And ultimately, Matt got shafted with the bill on that one and took the worst, the brunt of that attack. It just got reflected back at him as Michael Feng did, like we said, a little hocus pocus to really make this game a nail biter as we're approaching what could or could not be the last few turns of this game, as both players are still have all their equipment set up to block Arcane. But the story here, Uber, Matt Foulkes, no arsenal, but a wounded bull is a huge response to this. It's a 1-card pitch for 8 damage, and this is where it's going to get greasy.
Okay. Foulkes has drawn into a lot of reds lately, right? Red Scar for the Scar Command of Arsenal. He discarded a red card last turn to that Amulet of Ice effect. Michael Feng knows that Foulkes has theoretically 6 block value in hand for if he has 2 blues. He has to ask himself if he can win the game now. It is definitely possible. Can you present 9 damage, I think is the case here, from Storm Striders and a full grip? It has to happen before this wounded ball comes in. Otherwise, Michael Feng has to give 2 cards to the blocking endeavor. So it's more likely that Feng wants to try and kill Foulkes now. And the only reason we're in this position is because Matthew Foulkes is not able to have an Arsenal card on that previous turn, because there is another discard unless you pay 2 effect that he has to suffer. Something that's plagued him for the entire game. Been very, very hard to play through. Still, great that he's presenting 8 damage here, but I am more afraid for Foulkes than I am for Feng right now, who has a full grip and has a lot of shenanigans that he can try and pull off. It has to happen, though, before this wounded bowl comes in.
Okay, so Emeritus Scolding can present 4 out of Arsenal. Off a blue pitch, you mix it with an Metacarpus Nodes. That would be 5. Beyond that, taking a look at what Metacarpus Nodes says, whenever you play a card with an effect that deals arcane damage, you may pay 1. If you do that effect deals that much plus 1. That will not affect the Waning Moon. Waning Moon is not playing a card, it is attacking with a weapon, right? So,
but you can remember you have Storm Striders as well. So it's not just what's in your arsenal. It's not just your Waning Moon. It's also a card from your hand that can be played off that. And Metacarpus Node is adding 1 to each of those non-attack action cards that Michael plays if he can pay for it. So there's potentially 3 sources of damage that Michael can leverage this turn if he can afford it.
So what happens in this case if all of that is presented at Matt Foulkes and Matt Foulkes decides to go ahead, bust his own Storm Striders, pitch a blue, and throw an Ice Bolt at Michael Feng? But an Ice Bolt blue is only 3, so that's not even enough. So there, I don't think Matt Foulkes. Well, hold on. I mean, Michael Feng also still has an 8-point wounded bull to account for here. So he's thinking, I either block it out or I kill him. So this is a critical juncture here. It's either Matt Foulkes loses the game or he's there. So there's the Metacarpus Nodes being busted, pitching blue. That is going to be opening up all of those attacks. Sorry, the Storm Striders, busting them open. Here comes a red Aether Ice Vein.
Yeah, this is terrifying. And a Metacarpus Node activation here. So this is 6 damage. And Foulkes has 2 reds in his head. You're kidding me? He can't stop the damage. Unreal. A sink below and another wounded bull in hand. What a turn to be caught with 2 reds in your hand. There's not a damn thing you can do about that damage coming his way now. Oh my goodness. 6 damage off that Aether Ice Vein. Only 2 of it can be prevented. An absolute blowout in this matchup. And Matthew Foulkes gets caught holding the bag as Michael Feng puts this man on ice.
Oh, this was a nasty, nasty reality for Matt Foulkes. Somebody who, you're out there, you're thinking, all right, well, I cut my teeth on Briar. We don't like blue cards. In this case, you're desperate for a few of them as the game was decided by basically having, you open your wallet and the moth flies out. That whole thing, that was basically it, as a bill was presented his way and he could not answer the bell on that one. Michael Feng managed to just do a little do-si-do around all of the damage being presented and found it. I don't like to use this term. Actually, I love using this term. He pulled it out of his ass. I mean, let's be real here. He was against the ropes, but in terms of opportunity, he found a little reprieve because Matt Foulkes was all red at the end of that game.
Absolutely. Not only did Foulkes play a red attack from his arsenal that turn without go again, card in his hand was also a red. So no pitching to block AB. When that Amulet of Ice effect came in, he had to get rid of the card. So it goes a whole turn cycle without being able to threaten more than 1 paltry damage off of what leaked over from that Scar for a Scar. And then, yeah, having a red Ether Ice Vein in your hand, you have Metacarpus Node there as well, and then the Waning Moon. So that represents 9 damage effectively. Foulkes turns around at 3 life with 2 reds. So that's 2 points of Arcane Barrier block available. It's not remotely enough. And it actually ends up being quite a blowout on him at the end. Crazy matchup. I mean, it started really slow. It finishes in quite an exciting and explosive way. So hopefully that was the payoff was there for those of you that stuck with us throughout the duration of our Fish and Chip and Nando's sort of fueled, cognitively at least, rants. But that's all for a round of 16, Flake. Let's have a look at our bracket now and see what the consequences of this particular matchup are. We have our round of 8 matches, our quarterfinals locked in, and they are spicy. I'm gonna just rattle them off for you. Tell me what you think about this. Matt Rogers versus Michael Hamilton. That's Dash versus Icelander. We have Isaac Kroot versus MajiinBae. Again, Briar going up against Icelander. Michael Feng versus DM Amada. A very fascinating Dromai versus Icelander head-to-head. And then Tarek Patel on Fire going up against Ethan Van Sant on Levia. 4 insane matchups and no mirror matches in sight.
I love to see it, frankly. I mean, we're kicking it off with Matt Rogers versus Michael Hamilton. That is a dream matchup in that most people would probably want to write down as, you know, that's sort of the pinnacle type of matchup that you want to see. Ultimately, there has been so many big names that have fallen, but like you said, not a single mirror matchup to be had. And look at these. There's 5 versus Levia. It's going to be so brutal. It's going to be the complete antithesis of what we just saw. It is going to be hot. It's going to be heavy. It's going to be over in a heartbeat, much like my dating life. And ultimately, it's going to be so fun to watch. Also, like my OnlyFans. So subscribe to each of those, including
all
here.
Right, yeah. We'll, if that exists, we'll put the link for that in the description of the video below.
Sponsored by Fernando.
Of course, thank you everybody for your support over this first round of 16. Tomorrow, of course, that's when our quarterfinal matches start. Keep that feedback coming in. We really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us so far in the Goliath Gauntlet. Much more action to come tomorrow, so don't miss it at all. We'll see you then for our quarterfinal games.